Hey guys, Brian here with Wolf's Prairie Outdoors. Welcome back to another episode in the 1894 CST build series. This rifle currently has excess sights from the factory. They're great sights, but we want to be able to mount an optic on here, so we're going to be taking these sights off and putting the excess sights lever rail system on. It's a great system. I have it on my 1895. You can check out the video linked up here, and I talk about it there and how it works for me. And we're going to be installing it here and mounting a red dot on this rifle. I think it's going to work out really well for us, and as you guys can see, I've got a chamber flag in. The rifle is empty, so we can get started. First thing we're going to have to do is remove the rear sight, these filler screws on the receiver, the dovetail filler on the barrel, and the front sight. Let's get to it. When removing the front sight, make sure you have a screwdriver that fits these screws tightly. You do not want to slip, mar your finish, or mess the head of the screw up. Okay, that one is out. There's the front sight removed. I'm going to drop it in my parts bin over here. And next up, I'm going to remove these filler screws. Make sure again you have a screwdriver that fits these heads. You don't want to mess these up. They can be a nightmare to get out if you strip them out. And after those filler screws are out, I'm going to switch bits and I'm going to remove my rear sight. Okay, once you remove that screw, you just got to work this. It's going to be in there pretty tight. There is a pin that keeps it from rotating when the screw is in there. I'll drop that in my parts bin. All we have left now is removing the rear sight. This is the fun part. It's going to be in there pretty good. Okay, when removing this, you have to drift it out one direction or the other. I have a Delrin, basically a really heavy-duty nylon punch. I got this from Excess Sights. They're like $4. And it'll help keep me from marring up the finish on my rifle if I slip off. You can also use brass. Last case result, use steel. But if you slip, you're really going to mess your finish up if you do that. So we're going to work on drifting this thing out. There we go. It was definitely a tight fit, but we got it out. It's usually going to go out one way better than the other, and same way it's going to go back in one way easier than the other. I'm going to drop that in my parts bin. Next up, I am just going to wipe all this down, getting the excess oil off that was in here. Make sure the surface looks good and clean. You can degrease it if it's very heavy. Now we are ready to install the new sight system. Okay guys, with the kit you get the rail, you get the rear sight, 2 screws, 1 long screw if you're mounting the rear sight, a short screw if you're not mounting the rear sight, 2 screws for the filler portion of the middle of the rail, a 3rd screw that is a jack screw with a mounting pillar and a cap nut for that jack screw. You also get the front sight and 2 screws to mount the front sight, as well as a 3rd screw that is used on some front sights, but not this one. Okay guys, next up, we need to start installing the sights. So we're going to install the mounting pillar first. This is going to be the most time-consuming part of the process because it is a very, very snug fit. You want to try it from both sides first and see if it will go in, which it should not. And since it won't go in, what you have to do is relieve metal off the bottom of it. So we're going to take a file and I'm going to lightly file the bottom of this. So what I'm going to do, take the mounting pillar, take a file, and I'm just lightly going to work it. As you can see, I'm starting to wear a couple of grooves in it. Those are the high points. I'll check it again just to see if it will go any. You don't want to remove too much. You cannot put it back once you've removed it. So do a little bit, test fit. I'll get back with you once I've got this where it's going to fit. No need to watch me file away. Okay, I've got it where it'll get started. I'm going to get that bad boy on there, go back in the same direction that we took the other one out because that's obviously the easiest way for it to go in. Use my punch and drive it on in there. Just tap, 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 tap. You want to get it centered visually. Make sure you are right where you need to be. Okay, now that the mounting pillar is installed, I like to dry fit everything and make sure that everything is going to line up exactly as it should. I don't want any questions when it comes to setting things in place. All these holes are lining up very nicely, so I'm going to take that off for a second. I'm going to get the supplied Allen wrench and jack screw. Okay, I'm going to set the jack screw in place. Again, we're just dry fitting. I just want to make sure everything fits as it should. Once the jack screw is in, I'll set the rail back on here. I will take the nut that goes on top of the jack screw, get it set in place. Again, guys, especially right here, you want to make sure you have the proper screwdriver tip for what you're doing, because this anodized aluminum will scratch and you're up a creek once you've scratched it. There's really nothing you can do to go back and fix it and make it look as it does from the factory. Okay guys, next up I'm going to set the rear sight in place to make sure it looks good. Again, as mentioned earlier, there are 2 screws for this. The longer screw is the one that you will use if you are using the rear sight, and the shorter screw is the one you will use if you are not using the rear sight. So I'm going to set the shorter screw aside. I do not need it at all. And switch out my screwdriver tips. And I'm going to grab my other 2 screws for the front filler holes that help hold this rail in place. Drop those in place. Okay, everything looks to be fitting very nicely. Now what I'm going to do is take one piece out, Loctite it. Take the next piece out, Loctite it. That way, it's not going to move. Everything is where it should be and we'll be good to go. So let's start with that process. I'm going to start with the jack screw up front first. So I'm going to remove this nut, get that nut off of there, set it aside, grab my Allen wrench and remove the jack screw. Once the jack screw is removed, I'm going to go ahead and get my thread locker that is supplied. You want just a little bit. As they say, a little dab will do you. You don't want it getting sloppy and running all over the place, but you do want it to be in there. So I'll apply a nice amount just lightly around the threads. And being as this is a 357, there is not a ton of recoil on this. So it's not like the big bore 4570 I've got behind me. It's not going to be doing massive damage to this. Okay, that is in there. Now I'm going to reinstall my cap nut, and there is a little bit of thread locker running out from the threads that will grab this as well. Make sure that bad boy's nice and tight, but you don't want to strip it out. Don't overdo it. Okay, next up, let's move to the back end. These parts do matter. These holes are open to the inside of the receiver, so if you put too much thread locker on, it's going to run down and get in your action and can cause problems. So you want to be sparing with this part of the process. Remove my first screw. Ever so slightly. Drop that bad boy in there. And tighten that one up. I'm going to grab a paper towel and wipe a little bit on the rail I got on there off. Okay, time for the next screw. Alrighty, drop that bad boy in there. Again, be careful here, guys. Use the proper screwdriver tip and take your time. This stuff will not set up instantaneously, so you do have time to take your time and make sure you don't mar your finish. Tighten it up nicely. Don't overdo it. And lastly, I'll do the rear sight screw. Now you don't want to tighten any of these over 20 inch-pounds, which is basically, they say, a firm handshake. So just make sure you're aggressive with it, but not so much that you strip it out. Last screw on the back going in. Tighten it down like a firm handshake. Okay, I'm going to wipe the excess off that ran, and I'm going to switch out bits for the front sight. Let's move on. Okay guys, keep in mind this set comes with 3 mounting screws for the front sight, but that's only if your front sight has 3 holes. As you guys can see, this front sight on the 1894 only has 2 holes, so I will not be needing this 3rd filler screw. That one can go bye-bye just like the other screw did. Okay, so now I'm going to set my front sight on there and I'm going to dry fit it. I will start it off with the screws already in it, and once the screws are in it, it will be easier to line up with where it's going. Once I get it lined up, I'm going to go ahead and get my screws started. This way, when I install my thread locker, it's where it's going to be. It's not moving. Everything is as it should be. So it's on there, looks good. So I'm going to remove 1 screw. And I will have to turn the rifle upside down for this portion to get the screw out. Okay. Now that I have the screw back in my hand, I will install some thread locker. Okay, drop that bad boy down in there. Don't over tighten it, but get it good and snug like a firm handshake. I'll take my paper towel and wipe that excess off on the sight. And now I will remove the other screw and repeat the process. Thread locker. Okay. Drop it down in there. And tighten our last screw up. Firm handshake. Go back through and double check all your screws. Make sure everything's good and tight. Alright guys, that's it. The rail's installed, looks really good. I think it's going to give us a great mounting point for whatever type of optic we choose to use. I know it works great on the 1895, which is a 4570, so I know it's going to hold up to this 357 with no problems. We've kept the large aperture on the rear sight for now. We are going to hold on to the small aperture, set it aside just in case later we want to put it on there. I've received a lot of questions along the way about the different thumbnail images and the shell holder that's at the front of the rifle, and I figure I'll go ahead and talk about that now. I was going to wait and cover it in the final video and show you guys how well it works, but for now I'll tell you about it. It is the Hoptic USA Longbow Quiver, and it holds 6 rounds of 357 or 38 special. It's aluminum and works with any M-LOK system. I have seen where guys actually screw it straight to a polymer stock or a wood stock, but it works extremely well, keeps the rounds up front, and just, I love the look of it. I think it fits this rifle very well, especially with the nickel-coated casings. It looks great. It's all silver and black. I really like the look. I like the flow of it, and these things are built like a tank. Over at Hoptic USA, he makes them for 357, 38 special, 44, 4570, 50 BMG, I think most 30 cals, just all kinds, precision guns and lever actions. Really, really good stuff. Check out the episode notes link below. It'll give you links to everything that we've talked about here today and everything that's on the rifle in general that we've done upgrades for. So the whole thing will be in there, as well as the whole playlist is linked below for the entire series if you're just now joining us. That's about it, guys. If you like what you see, give us a big thumbs up, hit that subscribe button, let us know you like what we're doing. Check back often. We've got a whole lot more coming with this. We're going to take it out to the range soon. We've got to get an optic mounted. Once we get the optic mounted on it, we're going to go out there and run the fool out of it, see how it works, and see how these parts work together. I mean, we've done a lot to this rifle, and I think it's really improved the handling and the functionality of it, and I can't wait to see what the whole package does now that we've got it put together. Hope you guys enjoyed it. Have a good one.